The angle that we're using, after we multiply by 2, we get 14 pi over 8. 14 over 8 reduces to 7 pi over 4, which is on our unit circle. So this is our angle. Okay. The second thing we need to figure out is what quadrant do we think this angle is going to fall in? Don't say it out loud, but I want you to kind of think about it. What quadrant do you think we are in? 7 over 8. Show me with your fingers. What quadrant do you think we're in? 7 over 8. 2. We're in quadrant 2. So remember, we count by half of our denominator. So this would be 0 over 8, 4 over 8, 8 over 8. So 7 over 8 would be somewhere in here. So we're in quadrant 2. And in quadrant 2, what is tangent? In quadrant 2, is tangent positive or negative? Negative. All right, so that's all important to kind of keep in mind. So now, the good thing about tangent, well, good or bad, is that we actually have an option. So look at your pink paper. If you flip it over to the back, do you see how we have 3 choices for a tangent half identity? Now, I never use this one. I think that one has a whole lot of going on. Personally, I would probably not use that one. Between the bottom 2, I don't have a preference. So I'm going to use this one today. And Tamaya, I cannot remember which one I used when I did your answer key. So you might just want to, I don't know. I did? Oh, good. Okay, perfect. All right, so that's the one I'm going to use. All right, so we have tangent of. So let me get rid of all of this. So we have tangent of. And the angle I'm dividing by 2 is 7 pi over 4. And that equals 1 minus the cosine of 7 pi over 4 divided by the sine of 7 pi over 4. So every place where you see a theta on your pink sheet, we decided that that is 7 pi over 4. So now go to your unit circle. Looking at your unit circle, I need for you to tell me what these are, what that number would be, and what this number would be. There's different. So we got to look at our unit circle and get the cosine of 7 pi over 4 and the sine of 7 pi over 4. So what would be our cosine for 7 pi over 4? Positive or negative? All right, so I'm going to put that here. And what is our sine of 7 pi over 4? So that goes here. So from here, we're just simplifying. So in our numerator, instead of 1, I'm going to rewrite 1 as 2 over 2. And that's minus root 2 over 2. And that's divided by negative root 2 over 2. We need a common denominator in order to subtract fractions. So now we can pull it together. So I'm going to separate it now. So I have 2 minus root 2 over 2. And that's divided by negative root 2 over 2. So I just like to split my fraction apart. Whenever I have a fraction divided by a fraction, I like to split it. And now we have to divide fractions. And we divide fractions by doing what? Keep, change, flip. So that's going to give me 2 minus root 2 over 2 times. And it would be a negative 2 over root 2. It doesn't matter where we put that negative. as long as the negative is somewhere in that denominator. So I know I moved it, but it's okay because it's still there. Now at this point, we have to multiply across, but when you're multiplying, I recommend you simplify first, and both of these numbers at a diagonal can be divided by 2, which would make this a 1, and it would make this a 1. So I cross simplified first, and now we are ready to multiply. Yes.
Where's 2 go in the top right? Like, how did you get the...
I don't even know.
Oh, no, I see.
Okay. So now we're going to multiply across, and when I multiply across, I'm taking this times -1, which is just going to make that -1 times, I'm going to go ahead and put this in parentheses. And that's all over root 2. All right, so now we're ready to distribute that -1. And that gives you a -2 plus root 2 all over root 2. So I'm trying to go really slow. So normally we would be good, but we ended up with a problem. Yeah, we can't leave that like that. So we have to multiply top and bottom by root 2. Which is going to give me, so when I multiply here, I get -2 root 2 plus root 2 times root 2, which is the square root of 4, all over the square root of 4. So I'm just showing all of my steps because I don't want anybody to feel like, we're showing, I'm doing a little bit more than I would probably do, but I want everyone to understand where every piece is coming from, and that's where we are. So, yeah. All right, so now I know I have -2 root 2 plus 2 over 2 because the square root of 4 is 2 and the square root of 2 is, the square root of 4 changes to 2. So both of these can change to 2. And then your last thing you're going to do is reduce. And you can only reduce these numbers right here. You cannot touch the 2 under the square root. And what can I divide all 3 of those numbers by? So my final answer would be -√2 plus 1. And that's it. Any questions? So I divided all 3 of these numbers by 2. So I divided this by 2 and I got a 1. I divided this by 2 and I got a plus 1. And that's all over 1, but that looks kind of goofy to put it over 1. So I didn't put that, but if you did, that is okay. Good questions. Oops, wrong thing. I didn't mean to hit that. Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's go to our next example. Take a moment and copy this down. So we only have 3 examples. This is our second example. And then you'll have the rest of the class period to work on homework 12 because that's due tomorrow. And I'm going to help you get started with that. We're going to do the first one together. So I want you to notice that this one did not say in words that we're using a half angle. But how do I know from looking at the question that this is a half angle? It's divided by 2, right? Would you all agree that when you divide x by 2, you're cutting it in half? So this is asking for a cosine half angle. That's what this is saying. This is saying cosine half angle. There's only one option for a cosine half angle, so this would be it. But when I look at the identity, I'm going to zoom in real close. They told me sine, but in order to do this identity, I need cosine. So I can't do it based off what they provided. So we need to find cosine. So if we remember that sine is y over r, cosine of x would be x over r, we can use the r squared equals x squared plus y squared. So I know that my r is 13, I don't know x, and y is 5. Now at this point, you may recognize what x is, because this is what we call a Pythagorean triple. But if you don't recognize what it is, I'm just curious, hands up if you know what x is going to be. Okay, good. So if you know it, by all means, you do not have to follow these steps. But if you don't know it, then you do. Okay? So we're going to take 13 squared, which is 169, plus 5 squared. And then we subtract the 25, which gives me 144. And the square root of 144 is 12. So now I know x, so I can find cosine. So cosine of this angle is 12 over 13. Any questions so far? Now, if they gave us cosine out of the gate, we would not have to do all of this. They didn't. They gave us sine. Now, they also told us something else really important. This is telling us what quadrant we're in. So show me with your fingers what quadrant goes from pi over 2 to pi. Okay. In quadrant 2, though, and this is what's really important, is cosine positive or negative in quadrant 2? Negative. So you have to include that minus. This is what a cosine would be, negative 12 over 13. All right, so now we're ready. So we know we're in quadrant 2, so in Q2. So that means I'm going to start with a negative. So my cosine half angle I got my square root. I have a negative. So my identity says 1 plus the cosine, which is negative 12 over 13. And that's all divided by 2. So in order to subtract a fraction, though, we have to have a common denominator. So instead of writing it as 1, what do you think I'm going to rewrite the 1 as? 13 over 13. So now we can subtract. At this point, I think it's a good idea to break our fraction apart. Because we're dividing a fraction, it looks kind of weird. So what do I have in the numerator? What is 13 over 13 minus 12 over 13? 1 over 13. So that goes here. And I'm dividing it by 2. Now, a lot of people in my 5th period were confused, and I want to make sure I clear it up. Because when you divide by 2, that 2 is really a 2 over 1. Every number is over 1. So now we're ready to do our keep, change, flip. So I have 1 over 13 times 1 over 2. Which is going to give me negative 1 over, what's 13 times 2? 26. Okay, so I have my negative, and I'm taking the square root of a fraction. So I'm square rooting the 1, and I'm going to square root the 26. So, lucky for us, 1 is a perfect square. You can just put it on my desk. 1 is a perfect square, so what is the square root of 1? 1. But we ended up with a problem again. And that's that we have a 26. And we can never leave a square root in our denominator. So I'm going to multiply this fraction top and bottom by the square root of 26. And that's going to give me negative root 26 over 26. And that would be my final answer. That is my cosine half angle. Let me zoom out a little bit. And that is that. So we only have one more question. And then we can start working on homework 12. Does anyone need more time? All right, let's copy down our last example. Don't make me know never mind. You just keep on doing you. So this one is asking us for a sine half angle. There's only one option. And fortunately for us, in order to do a sine half angle, we need to know cosine. Did they give us cosine in this example? Yes. So we don't have to do the extra work we did in the previous example. We could go right to our identity. The other thing it says is that we're in quadrant 1, which means that it is positive. So we have the sine of x over 2 equals, so I have a positive, and then I have 1 minus 2 over 3. So that 2 over 3 goes here, and that's all divided by 2. So this is the identity that we're working with right here. Now, if they gave us sine, then we would have to do the Pythagorean identity again. Or we would have to do the x squared plus y squared equals r squared, but they were nice and they gave us what we needed, so we can go right to it. So let's look at our numerator. We're going to subtract 1 minus, so that would be so I'm going to rewrite 1 as 3 over 3, because 3 over 3 is the same as 1 minus 2 over 3. And when it's positive, we don't need to keep bringing it along. And I'm going to break this apart. So what do you get when you take 3 over 3 minus 2 over 3? 1 over 3. And that's divided by 2. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes to see if you can finish it from here. we're dividing it by 2, which is 2 over 1. So that'll be 1 over 3 times 1 over 2, which is the square root of 1 over 6. We break that apart and we get square root of 1 over square root of 6, which is just 1 over the square root of 6. We cannot leave that like that, so after we rationalize it, our final answer would be root 6 over 6. And that is all.